Hello everyone. We'll be taking a look at Israel, Ukraine, and other conflicts of interest. As of this recording, it is November 6th, 2023. So, looking at the northern border with Lebanon over here, we can see that the usual combat engagements, mostly, shelling, missile attacks between Hezbollah and Israel are going on. And as we talked about before, if Hezbollah is going to commit to a full-scale invasion or to more heavier attacks in the future, from what I understand, as of a few days ago, by the Lebanon Hezbollah leader, um, essentially he was supposed to be giving some really big, elaborate speech about the conflict and whatnot, and essentially what he ended up saying was just a whole lot of nothing. It was a big long speech just saying a whole lot of nothing. So I don't expect the this this particular conflict between Hezbollah and Israel to expand about too much more than what this is until whatever end of the conflict may be. And moving south, we can see the usual West Bank, Hamas militants in the West Bank, and just other things going on out there. And for Gaza, we can see that uh, the IDF has further expanded southward, moving closer towards the Gaza City interior here, not really getting to too densely populated areas or densely just general density area um, out here. For the most part, they don't. This push into Gaza seems to be more or less slow and steady, and trying to rely heavily on their, as we can see, air superiority, airstrikes, and whatnot. So, just in terms of the conflict and its trend right now, um, especially with how many uh, countries, especially the United States, who are calling for a ceasefire with um, uh, calling for a ceasefire within the conflict in terms of just Gaza to give relief and aid to those who are being affected, uh, mostly civilians. It's hard to see how this conflict is going to pan out. Day by day, hour by hour. So that's just how it looks out there for right now. So now taking another look at a story out of here of Reuters. So death toll tops 10,000. UN says it's a children's graveyard. Um, in referral to, of course, Gaza, the Gaza Strip. So what I really want to talk about here is the toll that this is taking on civilians, and just sort of the way it's especially being perceived and shown in the media is that this is Antonio Gutierrez, and he is the UN. Oh shoot, I should know this, but he's the Secretary General
Antonio
of
Guterres.
the United Nations.
Protect
So
must be paramount. I'm deeply concerned about clear violations of international humanitarian law that we are witnessing.
just when he said that, like Israel pretty much, not Israel, but the Israeli government essentially went off the rails and saying that this guy is promoting genocide, he is promoting Hamas, he is he's an anti-Semite, whatnot, for just saying that the killing of civilians has to stop, um which take that as you will, but it's- but when this conflict first started, I for every maybe for every let's say 5 pictures you saw of Israeli people, not even like injured Israelis, but um Israeli, either Israeli Americans, you know in the streets protesting for those who were kidnapped. For every 5 of pictures of those, there was perhaps one of Palestinians or Gazans suffering. So just in terms of the way the media is portraying this, it's definitely a lot more Israeli centered or centric, especially when this first started. But now I feel, and it seems to be that it seems to be shifting closer to more Palestinian, especially as it goes on, since the more civilians that die, the more civilians that are injured and, of course, displaced, and the more just people talk about it, the more people are going to realize that, perhaps uh, this conflict isn't so cut and dry. There aren't good guys and bad guys in this conflict. It's there there isn't a good side and there isn't a bad side. There are good guys and there are bad guys. I will say that there are good guys and there are bad guys, but there is not necessarily a good side and a bad side, if that makes sense. So, looking at some of the footage here coming out of Gaza, this is released by the IDF. So, um, just taking a look at here, and I'll talk over it as it plays. But of course, nothing crazy happens here. But a lot of the footage that is shown is, of course, of destroyed and blown out buildings, tanks rolling, soldiers walking, and also, as we've seen before, the destruction of, buildings. So, as to why that is, why do they feel particularly compelled to show buildings being destroyed? Um, or perhaps, tanks rolling across their land, the Gaza Strip, you know, who knows? Maybe it's just maybe that seems to be the most compelling footage that people want to see most is I mean, yeah, I suppose people like seeing explosions. That does make sense. Uh, I guess it satisfies that whatever part of a person's brain that may be seeing something go boom. But in particular as to why it always just seems to be, the explosions of just buildings and whatnot. I'm not too particularly sure, but we're of course looking at the same footage here, and hostilities are still continuing out there, which I can't show you that specifically, but this is just something I wanted to show. All right, now taking a look at Ukraine over here really quick. So first of all, looking at Berhivka, as we can see that Russian forces have pushed a bit past this either windbreak and to this road over here. And as we've talked about before, so we're on the topographical map mostly because I wanted to show that the reason why Russians seem to be pushing so hard in this area as of the past few weeks, and how the Ukrainians seem to have been pushing so hard in this area during the counteroffensive was because, as we can see, that these are heights and these are hills that I believe, if you are on top of them, you can look down upon, Bakhmut City and possibly, perhaps even Soledar and any other area of interest around there. So, yeah, as we can see, Russian forces slowly gaining back territory over time. So, just in general, that's pretty much what I wanted to show here in terms of the Berhivka direction. And of course, Krasnohorivka, we can't talk about a map update without talking about Krasnohorivka, since there's always something going on out there. As we can see, um, the contested area seems to have expanded a little bit as Russia seems to try and further encircle the Avdiivka city. And Mikhailsky district, we can see that Russian forces have pushed past and into this tree line, and of course, the contested area has grown as well. So yeah, just an area that we haven't really seen too much progress or movement in this southern area, which, um, as we can see, just in general, we haven't even seen any really, as a little bit of liberation. And of course, the Volodar area, last year and especially lately, um Russia trying to push especially hard in this direction, last year or earlier this year rather, Russia going for its winter offensive and then being completely stopped. And as I'm sure that you've probably seen of the, convoy of Russian armor having been completely destroyed because of their offensive on Volodar. But anyways, that's all that I had to show for right now. So, looking at some of the combat that's being reported out here, we can see, of course, 57 combat encounters being reported between Russian forces and Ukraine. So, as we've talked about, of course, this seems to be an uptick and a bit of a surprise, honestly, in terms of how we've seen that it's been around 40 for the past few days, and I didn't really expect it to really increase more than that as we hit winter and the colder seasons in Ukraine. But um, just in general, perhaps this is more trying to, as we can see, in Robotina, we're not necessarily expecting Russia to push back the Ukrainians, but more so trying to perhaps fix them in place in other areas of which they're trying to keep Ukrainian forces either in place or not, make sure they don't move all too much. And of course, broad shelling across the entire front line as usual. But um, just in terms of of course, trying to encircle Avdiivka as well, but just in general, this is an upward trend in terms of Russian assaults. All right, now taking a look at here at what Orcs is reporting. So, in terms of course, as we talked about it before extensively, Orcs has been a reliable source that's used extensively by pretty much anybody who reports on this conflict, no matter who you are. But as of recently, as we've known, Orcs deleting their Twitter and, just essentially more or less shutting down, save for just reporting on the losses in this war. So, just getting to the numbers, Ukraine was at 4,687. Now they're at 4,700. And Russia was at 12,902, and now they're at 13,020. So I believe the Russian numbers. I think that these numbers are correct. From what I've been seeing in the amount of, footage and, destroyed equipment, I believe those. But in terms of the Ukrainian equipment, losing just 13 uh, vehicles or just 13 not just vehicles but just equipment in however many days since the last update, maybe a few days. I I'm gonna be honest, I don't believe that. I don't believe that Ukraine lost only 13 pieces of equipment. Maybe they lost 13 tanks altogether in these past few days, maybe, but in general, I don't particularly believe these numbers. So either Oryx, the fact that whoever is capturing these numbers is has a pro-Ukrainian bias and just trying to mostly report on Russian losses and dumb down Ukrainian ones, um, or perhaps they just are not they're more or less out of the ability to track these numbers fully, and maybe the only resources they have are that can capture these best are of Russian losses, and they don't have the ability to track Ukrainian losses. But anyways, I digress. Uh, these losses in general, I feel that it would be an injustice not to report on them, but the fact that they seem to be at least seem to become more or less um, not unreliable, but um, I guess unbelievable or what have you. Um, yeah, that these numbers I'm not particularly completely believing them. So in terms of footage here, there's nothing I really wanted to show other than this clip, which I mean it's kind of funny. So this is a Ukrainian tank, and as you'll see that there is a Russian one-way suicide drone that is coming towards it. So it's just a few seconds. So yeah. So of course, as we can see, it just bounces right off. So just this doesn't necessarily mean anything other than the fact that they added a sound effect of it bouncing off, and of it trying to publicize it as a bit more funny, as a funnier clip. So as we talked about, it is war of the 21st century, and just trying to make it at least a bit more palatable, if not even funny, for those who are observing it. That's what this war seems to be trending in, and just not even those who are taking its media, but those who are also fighting in it. So of course, at this point, we can't talk about Ukraine or Israel without also talking about Myanmar. So this seems to be footage of anti-junta forces, and I'm just gonna show just this picture here. I didn't want to show the rest of this video because a lot of it is just gunfire, and even though there's no, nothing grotesque that is shown, like no blood or whatever, but I wouldn't be comfortable showing that just in general, especially on YouTube. But um, just watching this footage, as we talked about in previous videos regarding this conflict in particular and the individuals who are fighting it, who seem to be young men who, as we saw that one clip of them heckling the other side while in the middle of a firefight. These guys aren't doing that, but these guys are doing what seems to be a lot of giggling, laughing, and joking while they too are also in the middle of a firefight. So, are these guys the same guys? I don't think so. I don't think so. Um, but but do they perhaps have the same morale and maybe the same, either jokes and memes and whatever that's shared between them? Most likely. So, just in terms of this conflict, and also just, watching it, like maybe it's possible these guys are maybe even like under the influence of some substances or whatnot. As we know, just in general as well, just even in Ukraine and Israel too, and m- just I guess in conflicts in the broader sense, a lot of individuals, if they aren't part of a professional army, they're going to go into war either uh, hopped up on something to either make sure they fight longer or whatever, like how, what was it, in World War II, they were giving like their the Germans were giving their own soldiers like cocaine or something to make sure they fought longer, whatever it may be. Like maybe these guys are also have something, that's why they're also so giggly. But from what I hear a lot is that morale is very high among these individuals, which is why they seem to be laughing and joking so much. But it's also, it very well may be just a culture aspect of Myanmar that I don't understand. So if somebody knows why that is, if somebody knows more about this conflict, please comment below and let me know and enlighten me. I'd be glad to listen. All right, so last clip here. So this is allegedly, these are the Ukrainian special forces operating in Sudan. And, if you aren't following this conflict so closely, and if you haven't seen maybe the previous clips on this, you think, why are Ukrainians in Sudan? Why are they there of all places and not fighting in Ukraine where the war actually is? Well, Wagner Group, if you remember, is actually also operating in Sudan, and that is where they acquire, their funding, their capital, their ability to just in general fund um, their own operations, and it's also just an area of which they have a leg within. So I'll just show the first few seconds here, just for whatever, just to watch it. So. Um, and the rest of this footage is of their operation, of which there's nothing crazy is shown in it. But I just want to talk about that. Of course, this conflict has a broader, a broader sense. It's not just taking place in Ukraine; it's taking place in other areas. So um, if it possibly does expand, maybe, you know, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, but like maybe Wagner Group like has a leg in like who knows, like just Costa Rica or Cuba. Wagner Group has a leg in Cuba for whatever reason that could happen, and then we see Ukrainian troops operating in Cuba. You know, like what if that happened, or Venezuela, right? So just in general, that's just something I wanted to mention here, really quick. So yeah, just something to think about. All right. Well, other than that, that's all I really want to talk about right now. Of course, if you perhaps have some expertise in these fields that you maybe want to share, let me know in the comments, or anything you want to talk about. If there's anything you don't agree with, let me know in the comments. And yeah, other than that, thanks for watching.